Richard, it seems, I'm sure to a lot of viewers, that when government ministers have to resort again to blaming Fianna Fáil for all our ills, that suggests they can't defend their own policies. In this instance, they can't defend what yesterday's budget did to the elderly.
No, I think it's not a question of blaming Fianna Fáil or blaming anyone else, but the reality that we assumed was, in my area, an economy that was losing 7,000 jobs per month. That was the reality. 1 in 6 jobs were wiped out. So we set about making choices that would rebuild employment.
On the basis of policy.
Yesterday,
on the basis of policies that Fine Gael supported.
Yes, I mean, yesterday we realised many of those policies. For example, we maintained the 9% VAT. That was a core commitment of Fine Gael because we believed the hospitality and tourist sector had the capacity to grow. We cut the travel tax, again, believing it would grow. We've made new concessions to encourage people to start their own businesses, because that's the way in which we continue to build on what we're now achieving, which is 3,000 additional jobs per month in our economy. That's the transition that we've been working on, and it is true that we inherited an economy that had huge problems, and we're beginning to see that the sacrifices people are having results. But there's a long way to go, but those are the choices we've made.
Right. With regard to the issue of the elderly, which is what I asked you about, how can you defend the targeting of the elderly in that occurred in yesterday's budget, the cutting back of 30,000, 35,000 discretionary medical cards, the prescription charges, the increased tax on dirt, the property tax, which will double, will affect many older people, the bereavement grant? How can you defend that?
Well, I suppose it's against a background where we've to find, on average, as you know, about €1,500 per household is the gap we had to meet. So in respect of the changes, say in the over 70s medical card, we brought the limit down from €600 to €500, but we continue to provide those people who would lose their medical card with the GP card. Their maximum exposure in terms of what they have to spend on medication will be €33 a week. So at a time when the medical card budget has been under huge pressure, we identified that we could make some savings and we concentrate in the areas of greatest need. That was a decision we made. But overall, the
Richard,
elderly...
you're paid 160 or 170,000 a year. How much are you affected by yesterday's budget?
Well, obviously, all of the measures will affect, through all the tax measures that will apply.
Will you notice?
Well, of course. I mean, everyone has to pay, whether you pay.
But will you notice the extent to which you will suffer as a result of yesterday's budget?
Of course, I'll notice. Everyone has to pay.
How much? Have a guess of how much it will affect you. What percentage decrease in your take-home pay will it be?
I'd need a bit of time to do that, because obviously people who are affected will be affected by different elements of the budget. But the
fact is that people like yourself, myself, and Stephen and I assume, Sarah, we won't notice the changes, but the people that you've targeted will notice.
Well, that's
like,
not
for
true,
instance,
Vincent.
the prescription
Vincent.
the prescription charges is really a vicious measure, that for poor people who are sick and now will forego medicines that they need for their health because of these prescription charges.
Let's look at the other side of the 700 million in tax was raised from, if you like, wealthier people. For example, the higher VHI plans and health insurance plans, they are all going to be restricted. People are going to have their tax curtailed. People who have high pension rights, they are going to have their rights curtailed.
Nobody who paid what you and I are paid and the others are paid. Nobody is going to forsake drugs because they can't afford it. Because they can't afford the prescription charges. You asked me, was this targeted on a certain category of people? That's right, yeah.
And I'm making the point that the sum total of changes that affected people who were availing, say, in social welfare of schemes that outlined there of €6.5 billion, the sum total of reductions in the social welfare budget that affected them was less than 1% of that amount. So 99% of that has been protected. But there are real changes that are going to affect people who have the ability to pay, and those were including changes in pension, in access to tax relief for the various health insurance, the high-grade health insurance, and so on. So there's a number of changes, capital taxes,
even if you were to argue that they will, in monetary terms, be affected more, in terms of the impact on their lives, it's trivial. compared with what you've done to for poor people who are elderly.
No, that's not true, Vincent. We've protected, 99% of the provision is protected, and that includes the protection of the fuel schemes, the protection of the television licence, the protection of the electricity allowance, the protection of the tax relief that older people don't pay tax over 36,000. So all of that, if you like, support for older people remains intact. Everyone aged 70 and over up to €500 will continue to have their medical card, and those who will be adversely affected will continue to have the GP card. Now, this is, the reality is we're trying to make changes that are fair. You can't make a budget that gets us out of the financial difficulties we're in, that gives priority to employment creation without spreading
without afflicting the afflicted.
I think we're trying to do something.
I haven't seen the Minister's calculation on the 1%, but I imagine what it does is it only takes the 3 measures which specifically target pensioners, right? So that's the medical cards, the household allowance and the invalidity pension. However, there's another 4 measures that I can think of that will affect them as well. The prescription charges, the full year of property tax, the bereavement grant and the tax relief and health insurance. And then there's another 2 very serious ones which aren't getting a lot of play for incoming pensioners. And they are the higher tax that's going to be taken at retirement. So when you get your fund and you move into retirement at 68, there's the government's going to take a much bigger chunk of that away from you before you can start getting paid from it. And also the new levy on the pension funds. Remember, we were told it was going to be 0.6% for 3 years. It would never be anything else. It's now going to go up to 0.75% for next year, and then who knows in the future, but for now at 0.15%. So actually, I just jotted down, while you were playing the clip, I jotted down 9 measures, and there's probably more. I imagine when you take all of those into account, you're getting the kind of reaction which the Minister, I imagine, is getting, I'm getting in the office, where people are ringing in from the constituency, they're ringing in from various parts of the country. They're seeing an awful lot of things happening to their household income. They're saying we didn't have a lot of spare capital or spare disposable income to begin with. And I would say, I don't know what the Minister is saying, I would say that there is a sense of fear out there for what has just happened.
Sarah, how do you make of this?
Yeah, well, you're asking, will people notice? I mean, I think the government's plan absolutely was for the majority of people not to notice this budget. And the clearest indication of that was their own document that they published yesterday, which showed the net take-home changes in people's pay. And it was just table after table of 0%, 0%, 0%, 0%. There was no change in almost everybody's take-home pay. So I think that was the government's aim. And I think there was a conscious political decision this time round to make sure the vast majority of people weren't affected, and to go for small groups of people who, for the most part, can't or won't stick up for themselves. So, for example, we saw the cut for the under-25s, the cut in the dole, which is really quite a vicious cut. And we've heard very little from that group of people over 24 hours later, and I think we will hear very little from that group of people because they've been cut before and they haven't reacted before. Even if they do get annoyed, I think there's a protest outside the Dáil today. You know, a handful of people showed up, maybe 20 or 30 from what I could see. Certainly wasn't anything massive. It's certainly not going to be something that's going to change the government's mind. But even if they do get annoyed, I think the government is calculating they're not going to necessarily come out and vote. Then you have the maternity cut, and that's not coming until January next year. So the people who are going to be affected by that don't know it yet, or won't be affected by that for another 3 months. So you're sort of putting off that budget cut so that the people who are, when they are affected, the budget will be well and truly signed through. And then, of course, you have the elderly. And I think there's a calculation on behalf of the government that the groups that you're affecting will be small enough and disparate enough that they're not going to be affected. Having said all of that, I think it is a very successful strategy so far. Everyone I've spoken, I'm not condoning it, I'm saying I think it's very successful.
In public relations terms.
Absolutely. Everyone I've spoken to in the Dáil today, both Labour and Fine Gael, are very happy. They're not getting anything near the volume of calls I got last year. They're not feeling the heat from the public. I think you can see it even in the reaction in the newspapers, that because the majority aren't affected, I think this is going to get through.
Also, newspapers, bar the Irish Times, led with a critical headline.
Well, the Irish Independent led with the critical headline, and the editorial said a very fair and balanced budget. You know, so I think critical headlines, if you read on a little bit deeper, there was not that much criticism.
Richard, looking back at what's happened since 2008 and the budgets introduced by Fianna Fáil, which largely is supported, and which have been introduced now by the new government, that you can say that it was almost a deliberate strategy to target the most disadvantaged communities and the most disadvantaged groups. Just give you a few statistics which have been provided for me by Brian Harvey, the social researcher. For instance, the community and development programs were cut by 42%, and an awful lot of disadvantaged communities relied on those. The initiatives against drugs were cut by 33%. The social projects for disadvantaged young people are cut by 20%. Traveller accommodation and education cut by 85%. There's been a viciousness on the part of both the last government and this government with regard to disadvantaged people and disadvantaged communities.
I don't agree with that, and I'm certainly not going to defend Fianna Fáil's budgets, but I think our government has made very clear commitments to protect core social welfare rates, and we've done that. This year we have managed the total reduction in the social welfare budget was 300 million, so 98.5% of the budget is kept intact, and we have spread the burden. We have, for example, bank levies, pension. People on high income pensions, they're being capped. People with big social insurance, they're being capped. So we're taking money in a fair way. But the most important thing we're doing is we're tackling the core of poverty, which is employment. And we have said, and we've made deliberate, conscious choices, that we're making choices to support employment growth. And that's what we're trying to do for young people as well as older people. And we have committed yesterday, to a big expansion in programs, the training programs, the work experience programs, the reskilling programs, the subsidies for young people to go into work, because we believe that the solution to this crisis is to help people to develop their skills and move on. And Joan Bruton, I believe, is to be commended for changing our welfare system from one which was all about idleness to one that's helping people to avail of
in other words, to force people back into work.
No, to give them opportunities to go back into work. It's nothing. I mean, there's nothing. What's wrong with taking work experience and getting opportunities? 60% of those people get jobs from it. What's wrong with going on a course that, if you've had construction skills, you equip yourself to go into areas like maybe ICT? That's what a government needs to do to change our economy.
Sarah made the point that the cut in the dole for young people up to 25 is really a vicious cut, and really you're encouraging those people to leave the country.
I don't agree at all. I don't agree at all. The truth is that we're trying to make sure that for young people, and this is at the heart of the Youth Guarantee, that being on the dole is something that is a temporary bridging arrangement, that they get the opportunities to go on to some of those education programs where they will be paid more and get opportunities.
Where they will 30-year-olds. Why cut the rates for under? You just said, Minister, with respect, you just said that you protected the core welfare rates. You did, except for people under 25.
But this is the Youth Guarantee. The Youth Guarantee is about making sure that people who are out of work, who are under 25, get the opportunity to participate in
which on the training.
And that's what we've done. And not only will they...
Why cut their rates? Why cut the welfare rate?
We're giving them opportunities to do other things.
No. We accept the training. Training is good. Why cut their rates?
Our commitment and our vision of providing support for young people isn't about keeping them paid on the dole. It's about giving them opportunities to do things like the training.
What's the point of cutting the rate? What do you want to happen?
Well, obviously there is an incentive to go and take up education.
So why not do that for 35-year-olds? Why not do it for 40-year-olds?
Because the Youth Guarantee is all about the high rate of unemployment that's affecting young people under the age of 25.
The Youth Guarantee is about cutting their welfare, so they can't lead a dignified existence while they're looking for a job.
You look at the employment figures and you will see that it is young people who have been affected by this recession. It's they who've been dislodged, who haven't got a chance.
For them to get a job.
Exactly. And that's what we're doing. We're now giving them work experience, we're giving training.
But you're also punishing them if they can't find a job. That's what you're doing. If you're talking about an incentive, why could you not have paid them, leave their dole rate as it is, and pay them more to go into training?
Because we want to put the resources that we can in this area into developing new programs so that people move on, that they're not trapped in welfare, that they move on to whether it's education, training, work experience. But the reality is they are trapped in welfare. I mean, I heard Michael Noonan last night saying life on welfare is no place for a young person to be. I think the vast majority of young people in this country would agree with that. They're not there by choice. I think ICTU had a figure out today that there's 30 applicants for every job that's going. So young people are looking for jobs. The jobs
jobs aren't there, what you are saying to them is we are going to punish you now because we can't.
No, we're not.
Would you not call a 44-euro cut a punishment?
We committed in yesterday's budget to 130 million for new programmes like Momentum, which is being expanded.
Are
and
there enough
targets
places on all those programmes for all the young people in the country that you've affected by the budget yesterday?
There are 90,000 places on those programmes, and we're committing to
Do you know how many
adding,
people there are under 25 that are likely to be
there's
affected?
80,000 who are on the live register, so we have more places. Now, obviously, all the places won't go to young people, but the priority in this...
No one is
ring-fenced
arguing, with respect,
people?
no one is arguing around providing good, solid training for everybody.
That's
Not every
what we're
23 or 43, it doesn't matter.
I didn't hear you say that
why,
this was a good, the expansion of these programmes was important.
That's not the question. I agree with you on the training. Training is good. Why cut the rate? The only reason to cut the rate, the only reason I could get from An Taoiseach in the Dáil today was to incentivise them to take the training.
We want to concentrate. We're living in a world of scarce resources. We wanted to concentrate those resources on developing
Why not
people's
cut them for
opportunities.
30 euros?
Because this is the youth guarantee, and we're bringing together a series of measures that will help young people move on. And
the only thing you're guaranteeing is that they cannot live with dignity while they're looking for a job.
Look, we're not.
This is an issue of discrimination. Would you, Minister, would you turn around and say we are going to cut the rates for women? Because we want to incentivise women to get back to work. I took a look at the unemployment figures before I came on the show today.
You're forgetting. This is a Europe-wide problem with youth unemployment.
Let's Steve make a point. We've got to go to a break very quickly.
Right. What you're saying is the unemployment rates haven't come down for the youth. It turns out that since 2008, they haven't come down for women at all. The entire reduction in unemployment has been for men. So why not turn around and say, God, we've got all these women on the dole. We need to incentivise them to get back into training. We are cutting the dole for women.
But
you would never do that.
But they've done it through the maternity grant.
As you know, Stephen,
you would never do that.
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry,
Richard. I'm sorry, we've got to leave there. Richard, Stephen and Sarah, thank you for